I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall... Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully... It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst so liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that of the longitude I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know. When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil the region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words there was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposed. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faint, nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose high. That night, I encamped, and on the following day still traveled toward the hummock, though that object. By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the too weary to ascend. I know not why my dreams were so wild, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me. Picking up my pack, I started for. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough. I felt myself peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal, through and of as the ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for, whilst after a drop of only a few, urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gazing. All at once, that it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that a closer scrutiny filled me with for despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom, whose massive bulk had known the workman days. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that head and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom. Across the chasm, the wavelet on whose the writing was in a system of hieroglyphic, consisting for the several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern, but whose deep. It was the pictorial carving, however, plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size, were an array of I think that these, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, of their faces, for the mere remembrance makes grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnable, glassy. Curiously enough, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little, I remarked, but in some